So you reject the argument that there could be 200.
No, no, no. It's
people.
absolutely impossible.
Let's talk about Guyanese overseas voting. There was a time when overseas voting was allowed. Now, as you pointed out, there could be Guyanese, or there are Guyanese who are resident abroad, who have come home and registered, and whose names appear on that national register. Are you satisfied that it is a good policy to have Guyanese who are resident overseas being eligible to vote simply because they may have been in Guyana at a time when they could register, even though they don't live here? But because of the fact that they may be able to afford to travel and so on, can be here when there's registration going on, and if they care to, can come home at a time of the election and vote. How do you juxtapose that against other Guyanese who have Guyana's interest at heart, might not have been here and cannot be here at a time when the registration process is open to them, and hence don't enjoy the same opportunity as perhaps more fortunate and more resource-rich Guyanese who can afford to be here to register and to be. Do you see any inconsistency?
Well, I want to say to you that Guyanese citizenship is a very sacred thing for me, and I protect the right of every Guyanese, regardless of where you live in this world, to be a Guyanese and to be proud of Guyana and to want to participate in what happens in Guyana. And a lot of people who've left Guyana over many years have left for better education, better economic opportunity, maybe, better for their children and so on. A lot of people who left would have preferred not to sometimes, and they really would have preferred to be here contributing to Guyana. And so, and I always like to say that maybe I believe that some of Guyana's greatest assets are out there in the diaspora. And so they have a right to hold the ID card, they have a right to be on that register if they're here, and they could do it. But I believe that you must be here, right? And so if your interest is so high that you feel passionate enough to come back home and vote at the election, that must be your right. Your right to have been registered and your right to vote. To me, it's a sacred right that we must protect. And I absolutely support the right of every single Guyanese who would have taken the time to register, to be in the National Register of Registrants, and so long as nothing disqualifies you from voting if you're insane, and all the other conditionalities that may be there in law, I think I fully support Guyanese coming back home and presenting themselves at a polling station and making their voices heard.
The PSC has been on record as not being in support of house-to-house registration. First of all, clarify something for me. Does house-to-house registration necessarily translate into an abandonment of the INRR?
Well, if you're talking about continuous registration, if you're talking about claims and objections, you're talking about using the current National Register of Registrants database, because that is built already. If you were going to do house-to-house registration all over again, it means that you're starting to build a new database. It means that you have taken the decision to scrap the current database that was built over the last 10 years at a cost of billions of dollars and human and labor and time and so on and people's effort. And if you started that over again, then you're going to be effectively disenfranchising a lot of people, for example, who would have registered that happen not to be in Guyana today, pilots who might be flying the day you go to my house. And so the registration process, if you went to start over a registration process house to house, first of all, if I'm not at home, I've lost my game. And second of all, and second of all, you are in fact making a decision that all of the ID cards that we now hold become null and void, right? All of the ID cards that is part of that national register of registrants with fingerprints and biometrics and the $600,000 we spent back, all of those things have gone. So, you know, the good thing is now that the new chairperson, the justice is there, and hopefully she will listen to all of the arguments on this issue, and she will make a decision. And I'll tell you, Wesley, I am a firm believer in the rule of law, and I firmly believe in compliance with the Constitution, and I believe that this new chairperson was properly installed, and I would urge every person, every stakeholder to support her, whether we like it or not. After her deliberations, her better judgment, we must support her one way or the other way.
I mean, ultimately, I think and understandably so, the quest is for free, fair, and verifiable elections. How optimistic are you personally and the PSC that this can be achieved at the upcoming election?
Well, I believe that a lot of effort was put into the GCOM systems over the last 10 years to ensure those exact same things: fair and free and credible elections and verifiable elections. And that is the reason, for example, we have had violence-free elections in 2006, in 2011, in 2015, in 2016, because there was no question in the system. Lowenfield and his staff were running a very efficient system. Now, I'm not saying to you there can be allegations of impropriety here, impropriety there, but but there are systems to prove it. But generally, I would say in the last 10 years, we have had an electoral system that was surrounded and founded on peace and freedom and so on. And I see no reason why we can't. What is happening now, though, is because of the constitutional requirement as dictated by the Constitution when elections should be held. And remember, if as a country we decide to go back to house registration, in 2008 when we did the last one that we did, it took almost a year and a half. So we would have to be conscious of the fact that if we choose now to do that we are in fact violating the Constitution, because there's no way GCOM could meet its constitutional requirement in the time outlined by the Constitution. And whether there's there's allegations of this list being bloated by 200,000, which is not true, and it is very easy. And so the way to do this, I believe, that the United Nations have offered GCOM technical IT help. GCOM needs to take that help right away. So if I was supposed to offer any opinion, I would say that we should take all of the international help we could to do whatever testing and verification we need of the current database. So get all the international help. The United Nations is ready to send back their experts into Guyana tomorrow. All we have to do is say yes. And so to me, that is what we need to do. And finally, I would say to you, Wesley, as the private sector, we don't pick sides. We are not really interested in, as a private sector in general, who win or lose elections. What we are interested in is the process must be fair, free, it must be in compliance with the Constitution, and so on. And so, for us, we want to have a government that is properly installed, that is not hindered in any way by any classification of being a caretaker government. We want a government with its full powers, so that we could work with our government in continuing national development and creating jobs, and especially what is before us in Guyana, with the enormous possibilities where every single Guyanese could benefit from what is before us. I think if there's any time in the history of Guyana for our political leaders to work together is now. They need to take an example from what Burnham and Jagan did back in the 50s and join together to deal with what they were dealing with at the time, which was colonialism. They joined together. Eventually, people divided them. Now is the time that we should not allow people to divide us. Now is the time when I believe, more than any time in our history, our leaders need to come together, work together in the interest of the children. Thank you, Mr.
Well, thank you. But just before we we wrap up, and I think, I mean, we all, I don't think that there are too many Guyanese that would not want that kind of unity and collaboration, particularly now that the nation is on the cusp of an era of potential prosperity that is sometimes mind-boggling. But given the fact that we still have this ethnic, we made up as a country on the basis of 6 races. Our politics seem to be divided down ethnic lines, particularly as it relates to the 2 major ethnic groups. How do you think we could overcome that? And do you think that because, not unlike in other countries where, one ethnic group may dominate the economic space of the country, not deliberately so, but that's how the society emerges. Do you think that the whole question of the composition of the PSC, because business for the most part is not necessarily dominated, but let me say concentrated among a particular set of business people that represent one ethnic group. Do you think, for reasons such as those, that the PSC is sometimes labeled racist?
Again, whoever made that allegation racist or biased with the Private Sector Commission, and they make those allegations from a position of ignorance. And ignorance, not of foolishness, but of ignorance of just a lack of knowledge. Because if you came to council meeting, you will find a wide cross-section of Guyanese from every race, every geographic space, every political space at the Private Sector Commission. And so the Private Sector Commission really represents this country in its true form. But you asked the question about the issue of the division in race. And I will say to you, Guyanese love Guyanese. Black Guyanese, Indo-Guyanese, Portuguese Guyanese, we live together as one. Our leaders need to stop. The leaders need to lead and bring the people together. I remember, and let me end by saying this, I remember in 1996, I went and planted the flag on Mount Paraima. For the first time, I had a Guyanese flag on Mount Paraima. When I came back, we had a cocktail at Carol Lodge, where we were talking about this, and we were talking about really trying to forge unity between Guyanese. And so in the room, they had maybe 100 people. And I asked everybody to hold hands. And I had Desmond Hoyt on one side and Jagan on the next side. And everybody in the room held hands. And I said, let's hold hands on national. And people held hands. And you could feel the dynamics in the room, and people were so happy. And then I stepped back and I said, in the interest of national unity, I'd like to ask our 2 leaders to hold hands as a show of unity. And I stepped back and took their hands and put them together. And the whole room erupted in joy. I end by saying this. If President Granger and the opposition leader should hold hands and join forces to take our country together, for us to take advantage of what is before us, I think this country will take off like a rocket.
Ladies and gentlemen, can I propose that our 2 leaders, our president and the leader of the minority, join hands in solidarity.